and we should get started in just 2 minutes. I muted your microphones so we don't have any interference. And but if you have any questions, of course, you can use the chat. And then today we won't have any quizzes during the tour because I'm pretty sure 99% of you have never been to this place, and so it's something new. But we'll be discussing some important things. Hopefully we'll have enough time to do so. And but if you have any questions during the tour, you know, Anya's going to be co-hosting, so she'll tell me if a question pops up, and I will be able to stop the video and try to answer your questions. It's always nice to be able to also engage in the discussion, so if you have comments, always feel free to use the chat. Very well, so welcome everyone. I think we're almost all here. We're just waiting for a few more people, but we'll get started because it's very tight with time, and we have a lot to cover. So today we go out of Rome. We leave the city of Rome. Last time, and the last few tours I did were about antiquity, the ancient Roman Forum. We covered the Pantheon. We talked about the Emperor Hadrian, and we did a tour on his famous mausoleum. We went further west to the beach, or to the ancient Roman harbor of Ostia last week, and it was pretty fun. And so we're going to leave antiquity today, and we're going to discuss a time that is much closer to the experience that anyone might have when you visit Rome or its province. The experience of the Renaissance and the Baroque eras. It is an experience, you know, but it's always an experience when you go to visit the Colosseum or the ancient parts of the city. It's, as I said, it's like time traveling. And Rome and its surrounding provinces allow us to travel through time, literally to go back and experience the beauty, the locations, the places, the history. And so today I take you north into a different province, actually. In today's political map of Italy, we go north into the province of Viterbo, which is a small town just about 50 miles north of Rome. The province of Viterbo has a very beautiful landscape we'll get to see, and a specific place we're going to be visiting is Palazzo Farnese, which belonged to the noble aristocratic family, the Farnese family. We'll get to talk about them. And we'll visit this palazzo. It's one of those hidden gems or hidden treasures just outside the city of Rome. It takes 45 minutes by car to get there, you know, and it's something very, very special. So I'm really, really glad to be able to share this with you, because I'm pretty sure that most of you, if not all of you, have never been to this place. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now. And if you want to turn off your videos, you can. That might help with the speed of the internet connections. And so here we are, the hidden treasures of Palazzo Farnese, a quest for beauty. You probably already know that I love maps, and this is a map of Italy, and just a screenshot of the map of Italy with the blue dot, which is where I'm located. So in central Italy, we're in Rome right now, and I'm going to take you further north, northeast to an area where you can see there are a bunch of lakes. Now, previously, I did mention that Rome happens to be in the middle of three important volcanic systems. And we're going to reach one of these volcanic craters to the north of Rome, which is the lake that you see at the top of the page. If you look closely, and we can now start zooming in, you will see there's literally a crater, and this is called Lago di Vico. It's in the province of Viterbo. And we're going to this lake because it's not only a beautiful area. This volcanic crater, it's one of the minor volcanoes north of Rome. But certainly it's special because although it is the smallest of the lakes, it happens to be the highest above sea level. It's almost, it's about 3,400 feet above sea level. And so fresh air really close to the city of Rome, as we saw. And I'm going to take you to a small town, which is to the right of the lake, not too far from it. And this small town is called Caprarola. And if you look at this satellite image, you can see the lake on the left side of your screen. And right here, where I'm using my mouse to point out the area of Caprarola right here. And we're going to visit this building that right now you're seeing. It's very, very tiny. It looks like a little donut, but it's actually not a donut. As you can see from this map, this is Caprarola. As we get closer from satellite view, the town of Caprarola, the historical center, is along a road, an axis road, that climbs from the bottom towards the main palazzo, the main palace of the Farnese family, which develops at the top, at the summit of this hill, of this high area, and dominates the entire town of Caprarola. And the Palazzo Farnese, which takes us back to the 1500s, here it is, we can see it has a form of a pentagon. So now you know where the pentagon idea comes from in terms of its architectural design, because it is not a coincidence that the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. has the form it has, since it is the Department of Defense. The Pentagon structure, in many cases, was used by architects in the early Renaissance period as a defensive fortress. And in fact, the reason why it has this form is because at first it was built as a fortress. But if you look carefully, we've got the piazza right here. We're going to turn it around a little bit so we have a straight sort of figure as we get closer. You see the palazzo right here, and behind it are these beautiful gardens that further develop above towards the northwest. Okay, I've reoriented the picture so you get the symmetry. So we got Caprarola town down at the bottom. You have this opening area that leads directly to the facade of the palace and into it. Our story with Palazzo Farnese in Caprarola, which we see here in these beautiful pictures, begins with the Farnese family fortune. We see here the coat of arms of the Farnese family. This is the full coat of arms of the Farneses when they were the rulers of the Grand Duchy of Parma and Piacenza. And this is already in the 16th century when they really become very, very wealthy allies of the papacy. And you'll notice that in the symbolism in the heraldic symbolism, the coat of arms that we see here, there are elements that are very important. First of all, we have the unicorn at the top. This is an important symbol of the Farnese family that will be constant in the artwork that we shall get to see. We also see that the Farnese family main symbol, which we will also see repeated everywhere, is the lily flower, very similar to the French fleur-de-lis, and also similar to the Medici family crest. So we have these aristocratic families, and it seems that in certain cases their heraldry symbolism is very, very close, almost as if they were competing. But most importantly, we see in the middle of the shield two keys. And these two keys are a reference to the keys that, according to the Gospel of Matthew, were symbolically given by Jesus to the Apostle Peter, one of the 12 disciples of Jesus. And it became, through time, a symbol of the papacy, a symbol of the Roman Catholic Church's authority. When you see the keys in that manner with a little umbrella on top, in this case, it simply states that this family is very much linked to the papacy. And I see there's a question about the land below. The land below, I believe, is a part of, as you can see, it's like a chain, and is also a part of the symbol of sacrifice that the family has always made to protect the church. Because the Farnese family is one of the noble families that throughout its history, and by the way, they don't exist anymore, they've died out in the 1700s, but it is a family that throughout its almost 800 years history has always been allied to the church, and many sacrifices, many wars. You can see under the unicorn also the heraldic symbol with a crown, because they are dukes and governors, and also with a helmet. Let's move on and really understand where it all started. According to the documents that we have, the first mention of the Farneses occurs in the end of the 9th century. Maybe the Golden Fleece, yes, maybe. The 9th century, so we have documents that testify that the Farneses, which at the time were called Farneti, De Farneti, were members of the nobility in the area of Orvieto, which is basically halfway between, or a little less than halfway between Rome and Florence, in the land of Umbria, not far from one of those lakes that we saw. And eventually, they became the Dukes of Castro. This is a map that goes back to the 16th century of the Duchy of Castro. Castro is a small town towards Viterbo. And if you look at the map to the right, we have the patrimony of St. Peter. That's the church state. And the Duchy of Castro was a part of that. It all started with this man that we've talked about already, and this woman. The man was Pope Alexander VI Borgia, and the woman that we see depicted in various ways, in this case, a beautiful painting of perhaps Julia Farnese, a beautiful woman who was the lover of Pope Alexander VI Borgia, one of his lovers, but according to testimony that we have, she was in fact the love of his life, even more than Vanozza Catanei, who was the mother of his children. She was very, very important to Pope Alexander VI. And this is a beautiful painting, which was painted by Raphael. It's in the Borghese Gallery. The woman with the unicorn. The Farnese family crest, as I said, holds the unicorn. And according to some historians, this may be a portrait of some sorts of Julia Farnese, also known as Julia Bella. Another painting by Raphael, very important. You've probably talked about it with Anya a couple of weeks ago, and we see a detail. This is the Transfiguration of Christ, where on the bottom we have a woman who, according again to the art historians, could be Raphael's, again, representation of Julia Bella, Julia Farnese. And we see other paintings. This was a Domenichino, also with a unicorn. Well, these two, Alexander VI and Julia Bella, in this case, this is a painting by Pinturicchio, and we see the Pope, Alexander VI, on his knees. And according to some scholars who speculate that the Virgin depicted with Jesus on her lap is actually depicted with the face of Giulia Bella and her head covered. In other words, there's a sort of holy family here, although illegitimate. And what happens is that Giulia Bella convinces Pope Alexander VI to name her brother cardinal. And this is another painting by Raphael of Cardinal Alessandro Farnese, brother of Giulia Farnese, who was made cardinal by Pope Alexander VI Borgia. He was made cardinal when he was 14 years old. He happens to be, in fact, one of the youngest cardinals, Italian cardinals, to have been created cardinals by the papacy. They together will develop a small town that is within the Duchy of Castro, which has been for already centuries, really, part of the lands that the Farnese controlled. Now it's a duchy, it's a government allied to the papal state, and Alexander Farnese, the brother of Giulia Farnese, will hire the architect Antonio da Sangallo, the young Florentine architect, to build this fortress, this pentagon. And this planimetry takes us back to the original design. You will notice that the building was eventually changed. So the first building that was built in that area by Sangallo was a fortress, as if the position being strategic and important to the territory governed and controlled by the Farneses, they needed to have this sort of feudal symbol of power in that particular area. Eventually, things will change. As you see, the towers are gone except for one, and this is Pope Paul III. Well, guess what? Alexander Farnese, the cardinal that we said was made cardinal very young, he was actually, I mentioned he was 14, he was actually 15. He became pope at the age of 63, 64. In 1534, he was elected pope, and there he is. He's already an old man, Pope Paul III, very important. He, when he was still a cardinal, also had an illegitimate story with a woman. Her name was Silvia Castrozzi, and they had 4 kids. And so what does the cardinal do? What does the Pope do once he becomes Pope? He names family members, especially his grandchildren, in this case, here they are, to posts of cardinalship and posts of government authority. And here we see him with 2 of his grandchildren. Filippo is the one on the right, who will become the governor of Parma and Piacenza. And the one behind him, dressed in red, is his grandson, Cardinal, also Alessandro Farnese. They have the same name, although when he was elected Pope, he chose the name of Paul. Paul III is one of the most, one of the popes that use nepotism the most, besides perhaps, I was thinking of Borgia, but Borgia wasn't really using nepotism, he was using simony, he was being bribed. But in this case, Alexander Farnese, elected in 1534, Pope Paul III, will use his power as Pope in the next decade or so to create positions of power for his family. And he names his grandson. The fact that he has a grandson obviously means something wasn't right, because, as I mentioned, he had a story when he was still a cardinal. He had a relationship with a woman, and he had 4 kids. Well, no, actually, Olga, nepotism is not euphemism. The fact of the matter is that in Italian, nepote means grandson as well. So that's where the word comes from, nepote, or nipote in modern Italian. It means grandson, and it also means nephew. In Italian, you use the same word for the two. And so nepotism, because there always was a cardinal nipote, and in this case, the cardinal nipote is in fact the grandson, because the word grandson in Italian is nepote, and that's where the word nepotism comes from. So anyways, Cardinal Alexander the Young, that's how we'll call him. There he is. This is another portrait. Both of the previous picture that I showed you and this one were painted by Tiziano, by Titian. So he's very young. He was also created cardinal at a very, very young age. He was also in his teens, 14, 15 years old. I mean, amazing. My son is 14, Nikita. He's going to turn 15 in September. I was imagining today when I was reading about, rereading about this stuff, is my God, I was imagining Nikita as a cardinal. And what's funny is that he was created a cardinal, and he was not even a priest. He was not ordained. He will be ordained much, much later, about a decade later. So in this case, this is helpful because it allows us to understand something that is true of the Roman Catholic Church and sometimes misunderstood. And that is that cardinals, it is not an order of the church, like a deacon or a priest or a bishop. A cardinal is actually a more government sort of authority title. And the cardinals were specifically affiliated with the Pope. They were very, very trusted by the Pope. And that's why the Pope usually named people within the family or very, very close friends, because cardinals, de facto, by definition, were members of the church curia, of the church government. At any rate, Cardinal Alexander d'Este the Young, and this is his coat of arms with the cardinal hat, he will gain authority over the properties of the Farnese family in the area of Caprarola and Castro, and he will want to change Caprarola into an elegant Renaissance city, and for this purpose he wants to transform the fortress built by Antonio da Sangallo the Young while his grandfather was still a cardinal. And he will ask Giacomo da Vignola, Giacomo Barocci from Vignola, a small town in Emilia-Romagna, very famed architect, to come and transform the palace. We're standing right in front of the palace. Here we see what Vignola does. Essentially, he transforms the palace by building a new palace over the foundations that you can still see in this drawing, that Sangallo had built for the fortress. In other words, the fortress was not as tall, was not as high as the palace is today. It was much shorter, and it had these large towers on the sides. And so Vignola creates a palace within the fortress, transforming the interior into something really extraordinary, of indeed profound elegance and understanding. And we can see the subdivision. It's enormous. We have rooms on various levels, and they're very, very large. The building is at the summit, as I said earlier, and with an overview of the entire city. These are sketches that I always like to use because they really allow us to fully appreciate the perfection, the mathematics behind all of this, without the use of any computer technology, without the use of any software. I mean, these people, again, 500 years ago, did amazing, amazing things. And what you can see, if we were facing the front, which is on the left side of the screen where you see the number 0, and essentially you will see that there's a tunnel. Let me see if I can use my drawing thing here to show it to you. It's this area right here, and these are the stables for the horses. And Vignola creates a ramp that we will be walking over to enter. The main entrance is over here, and then we will visit the entire palace. And you'll see that since it's on a hillside, we will eventually exit at a higher level and visit the amazing gardens over there. So that's kind of the plan for our visit this afternoon. It's very exciting. So here we are in front of the stables. Take a look at the bathtubs with the lily flower. You have a double ramp on the left side and on the right as well. I'm just turning around. You see the straight avenue that leads to the palace from below. And there were little kids and some visitors, but not too many people at all. There were basically all locals. And this facade, unfortunately, you'll notice that in some cases the palace has not been very well preserved, especially the lower portion. But we walk up, making our way over the ramp. You'll notice that the years, I didn't mention the years where Vignola works, are the 1560s and 1570s until he dies in 1573. So we're talking about the mid-1500s. This is the period which in art history we call mannerism. And there's definitely ideas coming from, in this case, Michelangelo's architecture of the Capitoline Hill with these stairs that are on the sides, and the steps are useful because they allow you to climb on horseback. And we've climbed this first set of stairs. We see the main street of the little town, and now we're right in front of the facade, which is further up. So we still notice this clock on the right side. I'm just going to stop for a second. It's interesting because you'll notice that this is an Italian clock, and there's not many of them left. There's only a few that I've seen that still work. And I think we have a question. Yes, in fact, it was Michelangelo, Mario, who used it for the first time on the Capitol Hill, definitely. Thank you for that. And we see this clock, and it's an Italian clock. As you notice, it has only 6 numbers, not 12, as opposed to the French style, which we all know and we all use. And so there's only one arrow that gives you a more or less approximate time. In this case, it's showing 3 o'clock, but I can assure you it wasn't 3 o'clock when we got there. It was about midday, so it should have been pointing up to the 6th hour. And it shows you an approximate time. This is one of the reasons why they say Italians are always late. On the other side, we have a sundial, which was working, in fact, very well. So we have on the facade these decorations, and we find ourselves now in front of another door, possibly more areas for like a stable or for elements that were useful for transportation. Remember that traveling from Rome, where these people had authority and lived, to these places, as I said, it took about 50 minutes by car. So we're talking about at least 3-4 times that much. We're talking about a 4-hour trip, and once you get there, you want to rest. So we now reach, and you'll notice there's a bridge. Notice the chains. Probably there was a moat when this was first conceived as a fortress, right? So the lower portion still has this sort of fortress. Look at these designs. We enter through the door, and we find ourselves in what's called the guard room. Now this guard room, the size was useful for arms, and it was assigned for the guard service. I mean, these people had bodyguards. They had a special service. Look at these beautiful frescoes, the first thing that you would see as you enter. Now, basically, if we want to look at the plan, what we're going to be doing is we're going to go into the guard room. Now, the armory is where the weapons were kept. That's where the ticket office is right now. So we went, took our tickets, got our tickets, then we go into an open courtyard that we'll see. And then we will basically see 2 rooms at this level because the others were not open. We start on the left in the winter apartments. We'll see the room, excuse me, the room of the swans. And the winter apartments are on the left side because the way the entire building is oriented, that's where the sun hits. And so in the winter, you want the sun to hit and to come into the rooms for warmth. Whereas the summer side was on the right, facing it this way, on the right, where it was almost always in the shade. Okay, so we're in the guard room. We're going to go into these rooms later. We're going to see the room of the swans, and we're going to see the room of Jupiter. And then we're going to go back into the guard room to take the regal staircase, which is right over here at the bottom left, and to climb up into the noble apartment, which will blow your minds away. So we see in the guard room, at the top of the vault, if you lift your head up, you will see the coat of arms of the Farnese family in 3 different styles. The central one, of course, is Alexander Farnese's cardinalship coat of arms, but you will notice there's 2 more on the left and on the right of the previous members and posterior members of the family that participated in the maintaining of the villa or the palace, we should maybe call it. There's also frescoes on the vault reminding us of what Cardinal Alexander Farnese did. Now, these decorations, we could say that they exalt the master of this house, the cardinal, because we have the coat of arms. And these coat of arms, as I said, they celebrate the cardinal in the middle. But this family at this point, they were already interconnected with royals, including the Habsburgs and royals of Portugal. And so these are elements that are to signify what the cardinal did. And right here, what we're seeing is Caprarola. We're seeing a painting depicting Caprarola and depicting the fortress at the top to the right. We see the town. This is, again, a decoration exalting Alessandro, who restores Caprarola in such a manner that we could start saying that he's the creator of the new Caprarola, the Caprarola Nova. Also, as I said, these families there's Caprarola. Again, that's the main avenue, by the way, leading up to the palace. You can recognize already Vignola's work. Now, these are frescoes that were made also to celebrate the family as defenders of the church. As I said, the Farneses, they were always allies of the papacy. And eventually, as I said, they had even a pope in their family, Pope Paul III. Now, in this painting that we see right here, we see an historical moment. This is when they were defending, or liberating, I should say, the island of Malta. Malta was under siege by the Turks, by Suleiman the Magnificent. And in 1565, a commission that was set up by Pope Pius IV Medici to act in a military way to defend Malta from the siege. A member of this commission was, in fact, the Farnese Cardinal, Alexander Farnese. And then over here, we enter the courtyard as we continue. Now, these decorations, these paintings were made by one of the highest and most exquisite, talented painter of the Mannerist school, Federico Zuccari, and eventually, after his death, Taddeo, or the other way around, Federico Zuccari, who will follow his brother Taddeo Zuccari after he dies. So both brothers, they were painters, considered amongst the most important in the Mannerist school. Now, as I said, this is just to show you a little bit more of the architecture. We're inside this circular courtyard. So you have a pentagon with a circle inside it, and it's a double floor. Notice the arches. Doesn't this remind a little bit of structures like the Colosseum, for example? The elegance that we see here with all these beautiful grotesca-style frescoes. And in the so-called ambulacrum, we see these details. It looks like you're walking in a garden. You see everything's painted with these birds and the constant presence of the lily flower, the Farnese coat of arms. Of course, there were also statues in the niches. But let us move on into the ambulacrum, as we see, the name of Cardinal Alexander Farnese appears on top of every single door, a constant commemoration of the man who sacrificed the most, perhaps, for Caprarola, but also for his family. And we enter these winter apartments. These were developed along the southwest, the sunniest side of the palace. They were decorated by Federico Zuccari, and we can see the fireplace here, the windows, but of course the decorations in this case are on top. And we can assume that they are on top because there would have been tapestries for warmth covering the walls. We can see here sacrificial images that remind us of the typical decoration of the time, the grotesca style. The grotesca style, it starts already earlier, about 50, 60 years earlier, when they find these caves or grottos in Rome, which were simply rooms of the famous Domus Aurea. This is the room that is called the Room of the Swans, because you can see these swans adjacent to the cardinal's coat of arms that we can see here again. And these sacrifices that we see, you'll also notice these sphinxes and little faces. This is typical of the grotesca style, of which, in fact, the Zuccari brothers were definitely experts of. Now here we see already an interesting image that will be connected also to another part of the apartment, which is little Jupiter and the Amalthean goat here. Now the goat is, in fact, there's the unicorn that we stated was also a constant symbol. We have these recurrent images and symbols with these Greek letters. They are essentially four, we would say almost, or five symbols of virtues of the Farnese family in terms of their military courage, the beauty that they were able to create. Now, as we walk through these rooms, we come out and we reach the room of Jupiter in the summer apartment. Notice how the vault of the ambulacrum is painted as if it were a garden, an interior garden. The courtyard is, in fact, the heart of the building. Circular shape. It's an extremely rare architectural design for this period. It goes back to the architect Antonio da Sangallo. The upper floors were reserved for the family, for the cardinal himself and the family, of course. Those were the apartments where the noble residence was. In the center of the courtyard, there is an impluvium for water to be collected inside a cistern, which is underneath it. And the porch decoration goes back to assistance of Antonio Tempesta, who was there to supervise them. The coat of arms that we see painted are of families that were related to the Farneses. This was called the Room of Perspective, also the Room of Jupiter. It's a prestigious room that leads into the summer apartment. We believe that it was originally used to receive guests whenever they would come to visit. Besides the perspective, it is known as the Room of Jupiter because of the themes of Jupiter's childhood. Him saved by his mother from being devoured by Saturn, and then him placed with the nymphs and raised by the goat of Amalthea on Mount Ida. As I was saying, the idea of the goat is important also because the word goat in Italian is in fact capra. And so here we see on the vault the Amalthean goat and Jupiter being given to the nymphs after his birth, saved from being devoured by his father Saturn, the nymphs in the background, and the Amalthean goat. The goat in Italian, capra, and so the city of Caprarola, so called because it was founded by goat breeders. In this case, the symbolism is quite clear. The cardinal can be identified to a certain extent with Jupiter, a sort of divine presence in the town of Caprarola. The beautiful details of the grotesca style, again painted by the Zuccari brothers. And we see here the stories of Jupiter displayed on the vault of this room. And again, we have these virtues, the glories of the Farnese families with the unicorn and the unicorn that has the word Imerandorum, which means the gift of the day, the gift of life, perhaps. But notice the way these perspectives are allowing us to believe that the room is bigger than it really is. It's quite amazing. When you move around the room, this is a flat wall that you're seeing, but it looks 3D. And when you enter the room, it's quite difficult to really understand it. The thickness of the walls, of course, forces us to have to climb up steps in order to look out the window. And when we look out the window, of course, we see a part of the beautiful green and the view that we will further enjoy later on. This is part of the summer apartment, as I said. With a huge fireplace, nevertheless. And you can still see the incredible perspective of the walls that give us this depth, as if there were a terrace to go to. From the room of Jupiter, we eventually go through that door and we reach the room of the spring and the four seasons. It's one of a few rooms that are dedicated to the different four seasons, represented here by men and women, accompanied by various attributes. And here we have also the different scenes related to the heroism of the Farnese family. In other words, scenes that are related to Hercules. And this is a detail of the divinity Artemis of Ephesus, as painted in the grotesque style, which is omnipresent. Now, the furniture that you see is definitely not original. It has really nothing to do with these rooms. These are scenes regarding the heroism of Hercules, also the seasons, right, where we have both the rape of Europe in this case, and the rape of Persephone's in this one, so the different seasons. We go back to the guard room and we find ourselves in one of the most magnificent architectural compounds. This is really the gem of the 16th century architecture, the regal staircase or the royal staircase, which was hailed as one of the greatest masterpieces of Vignola by his contemporaries. And it was imitated in many different cases and many different times. It's a helicoidal form, which is used in a quite original way inside the tower to provide access both to the family members and those who were invited into the noble apartment. It starts actually at the basement floor, which is lower than where we accessed, and they arrived there with a carriage. And therefore, it provides the prelates who arrived in immediate entrance directly into the richly decorated noble apartment. This very rich decoration that runs really from the top to the bottom would introduce whoever climbed to the domain, this magnificence of the master of the house, by constantly evoking his identity and his virtues. The abundance of the fleur-de-lis, the beautiful imaginary landscapes that we see that delight our eyes. Also the use of this peperine stone, this grayish stone, which is not very typical for Rome, but you find it more in the various outer villas. We can see this magnificent dome with, again, the glorious coat of arms of the Farnese family at the heart. This is an architectural design that kind of shows you, again, the perfection, and hailed by many. It is certainly one of the most exquisite examples of Mannerist, late Renaissance architectural design. The grotesques also, in various ways, reflect as allegories. They revolve around the cardinal's crest and they celebrate him. They celebrate the moral virtues of the cardinal, his family. And one of the most frequent motifs, in fact, is the Virgin with the unicorn, as we said, in her lap, accompanied by the motto, Virtus securitatem arit, virtue provides security, to indicate the need of a virtuous life, a life that would be, in fact, morally virtuous. All of these landscapes are attributed to the artist Antonio Tempesta, whereas the dome, well, you'll find this quite interesting, but the dome is still a matter of dispute. So we don't know who painted the high dome. The Scala Regia, we'll reach it in just a second. You can see all the lily flowers all around, and it's really magnificent. Something that really, really impresses. When you first enter, you don't know where to look. You have to spend time there in order to see all these details, not just the architectural compound itself, which is just perfect, but the artwork at every single level. and different viewpoints will give you a completely different experience. And once we reach the top, we pass through a small vestibule, which would have been for a second guard, a second sort of checkpoint before really entering the private sector. So this is the dome that I said the attribution is still considered in dispute. You don't know all these allegories testifying to the morality and the virtues of Cardinal Alexander Farnese, and of course the Farnese family as a whole. When you go through this sort of second checkpoint, this very small vestibule, it leads to the upper floor portico surrounding the courtyard that we saw. So we're now going through this vestibule right now, and this circular gallery that we're going to take notice of the floor. Also, the colors go back to the coat of arms of the Farnese family, which is a blue lily on a golden or yellowish background. And again, more grotesque. Even this tiny vestibule, which should have been, as I said, a sort of second guard checkpoint with the symbolisms of the unicorn, will lead us into the ambulacrum, the upper circular gallery that serves to link all the main rooms. So in this case, it reminds me of a typical Roman domus. Okay, here we look back to the staircase from within the little guard room, and now we go through it. These beautiful imaginary landscapes with ruins. The interest in antiquity is definitely all there in its architecture, in the experience of it all. And here, this is the upper floor, so you can see we're now at the top. Now, the columns are no longer Doric, they're Ionic, and there's an extensive improvement, if you will, in the level of elegance that we shall see in the upper rooms that we will visit one by one as we go through them. Again, the art historians assign the works of art here under Antonio Tempesta in the latter portion of the 1570s. There were also beautiful porcelain floor tiles with the lily again, and in the niches that you see, there were the busts, a series of 12 Caesars that were executed by a sculptor known as Giambattista de Bianchi, the cardinal eventually, the Farneses. All of these went to other properties or were transferred to Palazzo Farnese later in the 19th century. We now move into the beautiful Loggia of Hercules. This is the central upper loggia. From this point, we have these arches that are now glassed, but they were open. In fact, this was an open area. There were no glass windows that allowed this extremely impressive view towards the southeast and southwest. That's where Rome is, all the way far away. Now, with today's hazy weather and smog, actually, yesterday's, we didn't see much so far away, but still you can notice that there's an extremely open, beautiful view from this loggia, which I remind you was fully open. So these main archways, and there was also a beautiful fountain inside this loggia that unfortunately no longer works. So imagine having a fountain sculpted with marble and with beautiful mosaic, representing, again, an imaginary landscape with a river and the coat of arms at the very top. Look at the colors of the tiles that are in mosaic form and decorate the overall beauty of the background of the fountain with these waterfalls and rivers, this sleeping little Eros, and this sculpted nature with the leaves and the rocks as if there were a cave, something quite extraordinary. the water would be poured by the different amours. So you would hear the water sound, and it will go into the basins, beautiful marble basin with again, the symbol of the Farnese family. And look at the detail, how the marble is sculpted to something that is, extremely detailed. It's extremely beautiful. The fountain was made by a certain Curzio Maccarone. He was an expert of such services for the illustrious patrons. And in this room, we also have the various frescoes of towns and cities that were under control by the Farnese family. Now, this is Isola. There's Caprarola right up there. This is a small town of Caprarola. And we also see the themes related to Hercules. It's called the Lodge of Hercules because of this, because of these themes that we see connected to the myths. The most important possessions of the Farnese family. Again, we have Hercules here with the different fatigues. All of this, again, going back to the Zuccari brothers. And most importantly, we see also besides all the images of Hercules, we also see the beautiful landscape. Now, the mosaic that we see at the top of the fountain, it's very, as we said, it's all colorful. Look at the sky up here. You can see the decoration of the cloud. All of these are attributed to either Francesco da Tivoli, and there are numerous fountains in the beautiful Villa d'Este in Tivoli that are quite similar, in fact, to this skill. According to others, it could be that El Greco, when he was young, participated in this sort of decorating of this rustic fountain inside of the loggia right here. Parma, of course, important city thanks to the Farnese and Piacenza, the Grand Duchy of Parma and Piacenza. That's where prosciutto di Parma comes from. Now we go into the chapel, the private chapel of the palace. Quite extraordinary, circular in shape. It is symmetrical to the Scala Regia on the other side, communicates with the portico, but we entered through the loggia. The interior, everything is in harmony. Look at the floor, the fleur-de-lis, the walls, the ceiling. There's this word, harmony. The whole floor, which was designed by Vignola himself. The decorating entirely done by Federico Zuccari, who eventually replaces, as I said earlier, his brother, Taddeo, after his death. Episodes of the Old Testament are represented on the domes. We recognize the creation right in the middle, and we'll get to see some of the details. But it's quite extraordinary to have a chapel, and it's not even that tiny. There's God creating light and darkness, the animals, the birds, the trees, the seas, and the fish, the stars, and this beautiful Pietà in the background of the altar. The disciples of Jesus, John the Baptist, and other saints, including St. Lawrence that we see here, Pope Gregory the Dialogue, or Gregory the Great, and we see all these different saints within the private chapel. We also need to notice the stucco decoration. This is God creating Adam and Eve, of course, Noah, these various Old Testament. This is Abraham, Isaac. And we see all these different stories of the Old Testament that were painted by Zuccari. and also these stained glasses with Saints Peter and Paul that give a very tenuous, very spiritual light into the chapel. From the chapel, we come into a room that is referred to as the Farnese Fasti, or the Farnese, the deeds of the Farnese family. This is really a celebration of the entire family's history. It's a really magnificent room, and it's completely devoted to exalting the dynasty of Cardinal Alessandro Farnese. All of these rooms, all of the key achievements of the Farnese family are shown here. And it's not just the cardinal, but it's the history of the Farnese family, leading all the way up from the 11th century all the way up to Philip of Spain that we see painted here, portrait that we see painted here. These are all various images. The defense of Orbetello, for example, we have the this is Peter. Yes, this is the defense of Rome. We have Orvieto. We have the meeting with Charles V of Spain. Here it is near Parma. All of these are, it's like a book. It's like essentially a document that wants to write history in a specific way to manifest the glorious deeds of the Farnese family with all the different allegorical episodes. And there's a question here. Who painted these? This is also Federico Zuccari, who paints these, the Farnese deeds. Of course, when we see Taddeo and Federico Zuccari, we need to, when we say these names, we need to appreciate the fact that these guys, they have workshops, they have apprentices, they will work together with less important, perhaps less known artists, but still of an incredibly high caliber, because, you know, you're in this place, you feel dizzy, you don't know where to look. There's so much detail, and there's the perspective. There's, this is Rome, the goddess Rome. There's bigger frescoes and smaller ones. There's the stucco decoration. There's the optical illusion, the colorfulness. It's just exceptional that you would think people do this with their, with their hands and elaborate. You first have to plan it out. You have to make sure it fits. I mean, the math behind all of this, the geometry, it's just unbelievable, just unbelievable. The Fasti, the deeds of the Farnese family. This is also a period that coincides with Pope Paul III's papacy. Of course, it coincides with some of the most important achievements in the family history. Pope Paul III also will call an important council known as the Council of Trent, and there's a whole room dedicated to the history of the Council of Trent, which connects the two larger rooms. All of this, again, the Zuccari brothers, with the different events. We can see Charles V and Pope Paul III Farnese, who I remind you was the grandfather of Cardinal Alexander Farnese, who hires all these people. There he is, sitting on the throne. He's the one that starts the Council of Trent in 1545. The council will last for almost 20 years, so going far beyond his lifetime. And it is the council that will begin the counter-reform movement. I want you to notice the columns on the corner, because this is, again, a fabulous optical illusion of depth. It seems that there's a column, but it's actually, notice how it changes as we get closer. You see it's painted in the corner, but it looks as if it's coming out of the corner. And because of the chiaroscuro, the dark background, it looks real. You enter the room, it's just unbelievable. Look at all these stuccos and the various scenes connected to the historical event of the Council of Trent. Now there's a question. Well, the historical events are mostly political, right? We see that, for example, here, there's a truce between Charles V and Francis I. And this truce was something that happened thanks to the diplomacy of Pope Paul III Farnese, who stands in the middle, in the background. This is one of those moments. Remember when we had Perez and Arafat, and then Clinton was there, and they made peace. It's these diplomatic moments, but instead of seeing it on CNN News and BBC News, we are seeing it today, 500 years later, 450 years later, by going to Caprarola. We actually see the faces, the portraits of the actors involved, the people, the background, where it happened. And this is what's most amazing. It's a written book, but instead of reading it in words, you read it with these images. The appointment of cardinals, the blessing of the ships that will go in order to fight the Turks, the prayers that set sail, the ships that set sail to Tunis to reach the Holy Land, and all the stuccos with the always the same colors, the blue and the gold, typical of the Farnese coat of arms, with the symbols that we've already discussed. We now move into probably what is my favorite room. And when you enter, you don't see much, but you have to lift up your eyes to see this extraordinary fresco. It's called the Room of the Aurora, or the Dawn, which is a room that leads into a series of smaller private rooms in the summer apartment. And we're entering more intimate areas of the apartment. But look at these incredible frescoes that, they're just mind-boggling. When I filmed this, I was trying to give you the idea of the three dimensions, and the beauty of the Mannerist school, which precedes Baroque, is something quite rare to see in Rome. The only place where you can see this is the Apostolic Palace, and not everywhere. But look at how the Zuccari, Taddeo Zuccari in this case, paints the columns. When you enter the room, you think there's a second floor, and then that everything is open into the sky, and you see the sun rising in the midst of the night, the aurora. All of these allegorical personifications, the myths, the divinities, they're all linked to the theme of the night and to the theme of sleep. Since I said we're entering a more intimate part of the apartment. And the aurora that bursts, it bursts in from the direction of the window, right? And it's heralded by the twilight that chases the night away. You see that? And we see Mercury and the moon on the sides descend on Earth to induce sleep. Now, the architecture itself may have been painted by Vignola himself. And we see here all of the different allegories connected to sleep and silence. This is Atlas holding a celestial sphere, for example. These are all small details, you know, that you see in some of the smaller portions of the walls. But it's all connected to the getting ready to go to sleep at night. So even the images are a part of your daily life. This is Pan, who was in love with the moon. From the room of the Aurora, we enter a room that is referred to as the room of solitude. This hymn to solitude, according to some, was inspired by Petrarch's De Vita Solitaria, the life in solitude. Now, a lot of the images are in fact connected. Connected to ideas and writings by a famous Italian writer whose name was Annibale Caro. He is the first, perhaps, Italian poet who translates from Latin the Aeneid by Virgil in poetic form using, using the, it's called endoholistic syllable. It's 11 syllables per phrase where the accent is on the 10th syllable. So there's a musical way. And he was a philosopher, he was a writer, he was very, an erudite. And he very much contributed with Vignola and the Zuccari brothers to the themes, all of the symbols and the themes of the private part of the apartment. In fact, possibly this was this area of solitude was the cardinal's, private study. This is a room with all ideas that go back to different philosophers, Plato and the Cynicals, and the different writings that we see here report a moment of solitude and thought and contemplation as well. You'll also notice that the walls are not painted. Again, when you see this, it definitely means that they were covered with some form of tapestry. Now from here, we are entering a beautiful, very, very tiny room with a curved lower vault, and probably this was connected to the private office, private study. It seems that this is where the cardinal would be secluded, reading and writing, and the beautiful frescoes painted by Federico Zuccari representing various symbols of knowledge and study of the academic subjects. And we have Ermathina. Ermathina is a figure combining into one body the two divinities, Mercury and Minerva, which in Greek are Hermes and Athena, so Ermathina in Greek. This image, it symbolizes the eloquence of wisdom. the union with eloquence and wisdom. And it's rarely represented, but it was quite often evoked in various humanist circles in the manner of Cicero, who was the first to use it in the decoration of his academy, as far as we know. And it is possible that Alexander Farnese, in fact, requested that specific image to be painted. We move into the tower, which it's sort of a very private part of the study area, so possibly the library, possibly valuable collections of valuable manuscripts and books in this room. And then from here, going through a small, tiny vestibule, we pass through this very small corridor, which is beautifully decorated. This one was restored, I must tell you. And we enter another series of rooms that we get to visit on our way into the gardens. This particular room is called the Room of Penance, the Penitenza, and it is a room that leads to a series of chambers that comprise the winter side of the noble upper apartment. The images, of course, are images of contemplation and of contemplation of sinfulness and penance, where we see also different images of saints. After this room, we have the Room of Justice. The decoration in this particular room praises wisdom and justice of those who govern with the assistance of God. And we have this typical example of a concept of judgment with the image, the central image that we saw, and we will see again of Solomon's judgment. Now, as we come out of the apartment, we move into one of the most extraordinary rooms, I would say, and certainly my favorite. You'll see why in just a second. It is definitely a state room within the winter apartment, something extraordinary. And it is, in fact, famous because of its astronomical and geographical theme and decorations that go back to the 16th century. They were developed by a certain Orazio Trigini de Mari, and he was introduced to the cardinal by a friend, by Fulvio Orsini. As you can see, this is an amazing example of what was going on already in this period of exploration of the world. We have maps of the entire world and then the different continents, Africa, America, this is Asia coming up, and there's North and South America, and the entire map of the world. When we lift our eyes again, we see something extremely refined, images that lead to the celestial vault. The maps themselves were painted by Vannossino on the basis of manuscripts, information, and literary works by the aforementioned De Margi. There's the celestial sky with all the astronomical constellations. In fact, the gallery of the maps in the Vatican that you perhaps have visited is something that comes from here. The idea when Pope Gregory the 13th saw this beautiful series of maps, he wanted the same. And we have a question. So these maps are, once again, it's always the same dates between the 1560s and 1570s. In this case, we are at the very end of the project. So the maps were painted between 1573 and 1574. At this point, Vignola had died. He dies in 1573. He never saw these maps. But yes, this is the time just before the election of Pope Gregory the 13th, the one who we've further changed the calendar, the Gregorian calendar. And these maps, in fact, we find the gallery of maps to be something that Pope Gregory, he decides to do because he saw Caprarola. Take a look at the map of Europe. It's almost perfect. We see Italy right in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea with Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, Northern Africa, Spain and France, Great Britain, Ireland. We even see Iceland all the way at the top. The Scandinavian countries, it's pretty amazing because they are so. I mean, I showed you a Google, satellite image before. Now, for my friends here on the tour from Russia, we even have Moscovia right here. Can you read it? Moscovia next to Bulgaria. So they knew about the Russians already in the 1570s. I believe this is Ivan the Great, maybe, or Ivan the Terrible, not the Great. This is Asia with India, the Caspian Sea right here, Siberia, the Tartars, these various old names, China, India, close to America. There's the Italian peninsula right there. Very, very, very close. No satellite. This is America. Now you'll notice the Gulf of Mexico right here. Florida is kind of weird, but it's already called Florida, right? Whereas over here, where we have Mexico, we have España, New Spain. It's pretty interesting, right? In the 1560s, the Declaration of Independence wasn't written yet, but we already have America, South America right here, Brazil. Not very well explored on the west coast, as you can see. And then we have the land of Judea, very important, of course, Israel, with the different tribes, the Jewish tribes of the Old Testament, Samaria, and closer to Jerusalem, Palestine, etc. All of this is a specific map of that particular land. And of course, we have portraits of the explorers, starting with Marco Polo and Christopher Columbus. And here we have Ferdinand Cortez. And obviously Amerigo Vespucci, that's where the word America comes from, right? And we have Magellan, Ferdinand Magellan in this particular room. And following is the room of the angels, dedicated to the angels that are celebrated as instruments of power and divine justice, all of the episodes that we see depicted on the walls. And of course, in the summit, we have the constant battle between good and evil, between the light and darkness, between angels and demons. It's kind of a symbol of both the political and temporal triumphs of the church that are being celebrated as protected by the messengers of God himself. We see all the different major angels. And of course, Castel Sant'Angelo, in this image, you might remember, there's the Castel Sant'Angelo, remember, where they carry the icon of the Virgin. This is the legend of the seeing of the angel over the castle. The liberation of St. Peter, right here. All of these were painted by Giovanni De Vecchi and Raffaellino Motta da Reggio, not the Raffaellino who was student of Raphael, but another one. Here we have details of the Archangel Michael defeating the devil and all the demons that are cast away by the various angels. You'll notice that the angels don't, for the most part, don't have wings, and this definitely is a constant that we see in the Last Judgment by Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel, which was finished just about 30 years before this, so definitely an influence. These are all the angels that are, and there's the Archangel Michael right here. Now, at this point, we are ready to move outside, and it's the short part and end of the tour. But before we continue, I'm going to take a short break and just want to answer any questions if you have to use the restroom, or if you wish to get something to, a glass of water or to drink. We'll take 5 minutes, and then we'll have a beautiful part. We've seen, you know what, we have not seen all the rooms because there's just too much. As you can see, we're going really fast. We're not seeing everything in detail as I would like, but it's an hour and a half that I've been talking, and it's all very superficial. You need to go see this place. You just need to come with me, and whenever you come to Rome, I will take you there. Oh, for goodness sake, I'll take you in my car if you want to, but we need to go see it, because these are those things that mark your way, the way you think, the way you see. These are those amazing elements of creativity that define beauty, that really allow you to understand what beauty is. What is beauty? Is it subjective? Is it objective? Do we get to decide what is beautiful? Is it just what you like? Is it that simple? Of course not. And there's a certain definition. There's a certain way that has been built from nothing into something extraordinary. And when you see these hidden treasures like Palazzo Farnese,